Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or maybe just good midnight, depending on your time zone.
Wherever you are, welcome back.
Welcome back to Sip&Talk.
And I love bringing these topics, but this one actually came from a slightly frustrating place.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What happened?
Well, I was at a gathering last weekend, and the topic of health came up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mentioned the human papillomavirus vaccine, oh my gosh, the consensus was, well, it was stuck in 2006.
Let me guess. That's for girls.
You got it. That and it's only useful against cervical cancer. These were smart, well-informed friends.
That is incredibly common, unfortunately. I hear it all the time.
Right.
Despite global health organizations pushing this for years, that misinformation is just so sticky.
It really is.
But that's exactly why we're here. Our mission today is to, correct the vision on this. We're going to give you the facts with a clear international and, importantly, gender-neutral lens.
Absolutely. The panic points I heard were just incredible. Is the infection rate really 80%? Does that mean everyone gets cancer?
That fear is palpable.
It is. And we need to address it with some serious scientific context.
We do. And we're going to use the hard data to tackle that anxiety head on. We'll talk about that overwhelming global prevalence, how it transmits so silently.
Mm-hmm.
But critically, we are going beyond that initial focus. We're going to cover the new rising battleground that gets far less attention, or pharyngeal cancer.
Throat cancer.
Throat cancer. The risk is increasing, especially for men, and the vaccine is incredibly effective against it.
Right. I mean, that's the thing that blows people's minds. Preventing cervical cancer is one thing, but preventing throat cancer.
It sounds like a magic trick.
It really does. How does that even work? Is it like a flu shot?
Well, it's not magic. It's just really solid, sophisticated science. And today we're going to deconstruct exactly how that works. The difference between a preventative shot and a therapeutic one. We'll look at the molecular relationship between HPV and all these different cancers and, why the burden of this disease is so uneven across the globe.
I'm ready. Let's get into it. Let's put down the anxiety, grab our drinks, and get thoroughly informed on this critical global health topic.
And for anyone who is unable or unwilling to get the shot, don't worry. We will spend plenty of time on that essential second line of defense screening alternatives later in the show.
Okay, let's start with that big, scary number that causes all the panic, that 80% figure.
Yeah.
Is it actually true that nearly everyone who is sexually active has an 80% lifetime chance of getting at least one type of HPV?
That figure is absolutely accurate. It is staggering, but it reflects the reality of this virus. It's global. It's extremely common.
So it's not sensationalism. It's just
epidemiology.
It's just the fact of it. It's a nearly universal experience among sexually active adults.
Okay, but what's crucial here is stopping that panic spiral right away.
Because a temporary infection does not equal cancer. If we stop at 80%, we miss the entire point.
Exactly. For the vast majority of people, and we're talking about 90% of cases here, the infection is transient. It's temporary.
Your body just clears it on its own.
Your own immune system clears it, usually within 1 to 2 years. Your T cells, your antibodies, they recognize it, they eliminate it, and often you never even knew you had it.
Like a silent cold your body just deals with.
Perfectly put. The core danger, the real problem, lies in what happens when the body doesn't clear it.
That's what's called a persistent infection.
Right. And that persistence is the necessary first step. It's what allows the virus to start doing permanent damage to your cells.
Okay, so let's dig into that. The biology of persistence. Why do some strains stick around and cause cancer while others are just a nuisance?
It all comes down to high-risk versus low-risk types.
Virologists put them into two main categories. First, you've got the high-risk or oncogenic types. These are the ones that carry the genetic code to hijack your cells.
And the big ones are HPV 16 and 18.
They are the absolute heavy hitters. Those two types alone are responsible for over 70% of all cervical cancers globally.
70%. That is a massive number from just two types. You can see why the first vaccines focused right on them.
For sure. But the danger isn't just 16 and 18. There are others, like types 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58.
And that's important context for later, when we talk about the newer vaccines.
Exactly, especially when you look at different parts of the world.
Okay, but what makes a high-risk type an oncogene? I mean, what is it actually doing inside the cell?
This is the critical piece. When a high-risk HPV type persists, it inserts its DNA into your cell's DNA. Then it starts producing two main oncoproteins.
E6 and E7.
E6 and E7. And these proteins are they're insidious. They're specifically designed to dismantle the cell's natural defenses against cancer.
So they're literally flipping the off switches on our body's tumor suppression systems.
Precisely. The E6 protein goes after a critical tumor suppressor called P53. You can think of P53 as like the cell's internal police force.
Okay.
It's supposed to stop the cell from dividing or even make it self-destruct if its DNA is damaged. E6 just degrades P53. It takes it out.
So damaged cells are allowed to survive. What does E7 do?
E7 targets another key break, the retinoblastoma protein, or PRB. This protein controls the gate to cell replication. E7 binds to it, inactivates it, and basically forces the cell to divide over and over again.
So you've got forced survival from E6 and forced replication from E7.
And that is the perfect recipe for malignant, uncontrolled growth. That is why persistent infection leads to cancer.
That clarity is so important. That's the science that makes this more than just a common virus.
Then on the other side, you have the low-risk types. These are much less of a deadly threat.
More of a nuisance.
Exactly. The mean ones are types 6 and 11. They're also super common, but they rarely lead to cancer because they don't produce those E6 and E7 proteins effectively.
So what do they do instead?
They cause genital warts, condyloma acuminata. Uncomfortable, but not typically cancerous.
Okay, let's talk about transmission. This is where so many myths come from. How is this thing moving so efficiently?
The primary way is direct skin-to-skin or mucous membrane contact. So vaginal, anal, and crucially, oral sex.
We have to underscore oral sex here.
We really do. It is the key route for the rapidly rising rates of oropharyngeal cancer that we're seeing, especially in Western countries.
And that leads directly to the biggest misunderstanding about protection. Condoms.
Right.
If 80% of people are getting this, why aren't condoms stopping it?
It's because the virus spreads through skin contact in the entire genital area. Sometimes it's called flesh-to-flesh contact. A condom only covers the penis.
It doesn't cover the scrotum, the inner thighs, the base of the groin.
Exactly. The virus can transmit from any of those uncovered areas. It's a limitation of the tool itself, not a failure of the condom.
So let's just bust the myths one more time. You must have full intercourse to get it.
False. Simple skin contact is enough.
HPV only infects women.
Fundamentally wrong. It affects all genders. It causes penile, anal, and oral cancers in men.
And the toilet seat myth. Can we finally put that one to bed?
Negligible to non-existent risk. The virus needs direct, intimate human contact to survive and transmit.
Okay. Now, for a fascinating piece of data that really highlights the lifelong nature of this risk, the mystery of the double peak infection rate, especially the data coming out of a massive analysis in China.
This data point is so important. It's from analyzing millions of cases. Typically, you'd expect to see one peak infection rate, right?
Right, when people become sexually active, late teens, early 20s.
And they found that. The first peak was exactly where you'd expect. Young women, generally under 21.
Which completely validates the whole global strategy of early vaccination before sexual activity starts.
Absolutely. But then, the data shows a second, equally significant peak. And it appears in older women.
How much older?
Specifically women aged 61 to 80 years old.
Wow. That's astonishing. What's the explanation for that?
Well, the scientific debate revolves around two main theories, and they're both linked to aging. Theory one is immune senescence.
Meaning the immune system just gets weaker as you get older.
Exactly. It might lose its grip on a latent HPV infection that the body had been suppressing for decades. So the virus reactivates and becomes detectable again.
So it was just sleeping, and the older immune system lets it wake up.
That's one theory. The other theory is just new persistent infection. Exposure can still happen later in life, and an aging immune system is just less capable of clearing a new infection.
So it sticks around.
And it shows up in the data. But regardless of which mechanism it is, the significance of that double peak is immense.
It validates a dual approach. You need early vaccination for primary prevention.
But that second peak proves you need lifelong screening for secondary prevention. The risk isn't just a young person's game.
Okay, let's pivot from the problem to the solution. Let's talk about the science of prevention.
Before we get into how it works, let's firmly establish the vaccine's role. It is preventive, prophylactic, not curative.
And that distinction is vital. What does it mean in practical terms?
It means it has to be given before you're exposed to the virus types it covers. It can't cure an infection you already have.
So if you test positive for HPV-16 today,
the vaccine cannot help your body clear that specific HPV-16 infection. It can only protect you from getting the other 8 types in the shot.
So it's about building the fortress in advance. Okay, how does it build that fortress? Let's talk about the VLP mechanism, virus-like particles.
This is the genius of the technology, and it's why it's so safe. The vaccine has zero actual viral DNA, no infectious material.
Okay.
Instead, it introduces these virus-like particles. Just picture them as empty shells.
A decoy.
A perfect decoy. A replica of the virus's outer coating, made from its surface proteins, but completely hollow and harmless on the inside.
So the body sees this empty shell and mistakes it for the real threat.
Precisely. The immune system sees that structure, thinks it's highly dangerous, and launches a massive response, producing a huge amount of specific antibodies. So later, if and when the real dangerous HPV virus shows up, the one with the DNA inside, those antibodies are already there, ready to go. They bind to it and neutralize it before it can ever infect a cell.
It stops the whole process before it can even start.
It cuts it off at the knees. It prevents the persistent infection from ever happening.
That brings up a great question, though. If 90% of natural infections are cleared by the body anyway, why do we need a vaccine? Why isn't natural immunity good enough?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is about the sheer quantity and quality of the immune response.
Okay.
Studies show that the antibody levels, the concentration of those protective antibodies generated by the vaccine, are just orders of magnitude higher.
How much higher are we talking?
Sometimes 50 to 100 times higher than what you get from a natural infection.
Wow. So a natural infection creates kind of a weak, maybe localized response.
And the vaccine creates a massive, systemic, durable defense force. Natural immunity often doesn't protect you from getting the same type again. The vaccine does. It's just far superior.
Let's talk about the scope of that protection, because we have to expand the narrative beyond just cervical cancer.
This is the public health mission right now. Yes, cervical cancer was the primary target, and the vaccine is over 90% effective at preventing the precancerous lesions. It's a huge success.
But the real story now, the one that's changing, is the sharp rise in oropharyngeal cancer.
Throat cancer, often at the base of the tongue and in the tonsils.
And why is this rising so sharply, particularly in men in Western countries?
It's attributed to changes in sexual behaviors over the past few decades, specifically an increase in oral sex.
And why men more than women?
Anatomically, it seems that when men contract HPV orally, the virus has a harder time being cleared from the nooks and crannies of the throat and tonsil area. This leads to higher rates of persistence and then cancer.
So this one trend has fundamentally changed HPV from a women's issue
to a universal cancer prevention priority. It makes male vaccination an urgent public health focus.
What about other less discussed cancers? Anal, penile.
The vaccine provides high effectiveness for all of them. Anal, vaginal, vulvar, and penile cancers caused by the covered types.
And for something like anal cancer, vaccination is even more critical, right?
It is, because unlike the cervix, we don't have a standardized, routine, population-wide screening method for anal cancer.
Yeah.
So the vaccine is really the only primary prevention we have.
And getting men vaccinated protects them, but it's also about herd immunity.
It's critical for herd immunity, protecting the entire community.
Okay, one specific caveat for male health we need to state clearly. Does the vaccine protect against testicular cancer?
No. This is important. There is no clear scientific evidence linking HPV infection to testicular cancer. Therefore, the vaccine offers no protection against it. We have to be precise about what it does and doesn't do.
Got it. Now let's talk about the evolution of the vaccines themselves. Why 9 is the new standard?
The first generations were groundbreaking but limited. You had the bivalent, Cervarix, and the quadrivalent Gardasil.
They covered HPV 16 and 18, and the quadrivalent added 6 and 11 for warts.
Right. But the current gold standard, the 9-valent vaccine, is a huge leap forward.
It covers those 4 plus 5 more high-risk types, 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58.
And by covering those 9 types, it now accounts for approximately 90% of all HPV-related cervical cancers.
It moves the protection from just good to nearly complete.
It really does. And the inclusion of 52 and 58 isn't just for show. It reflects global epidemiology.
Especially in Asia.
Exactly. In many Asian regions, HPV types 52 and 58 are significantly more prevalent than they are in, say, North America. So if you're only using the older vaccine in those areas, you're missing a huge chunk of the cancer risk.
Which makes the 9-valent vaccine absolutely critical for global public health.
It's the only way to get comprehensive coverage.
We have the science, we have the tool. Now let's get into strategy. Who needs it and how many doses?
Okay, so the first question is always when.
Yeah.
When is the body most receptive to building this defense?
And that's the golden age of immunization. The international consensus from the WHO, the CDC, everyone points to adolescence.
Ideally, 11 or 12 years old.
And that timing is key for two reasons. One is vaccinating before sexual activity begins. The other is about the immune system itself.
The data on this is overwhelming. Kids aged 9 to 14 have an immune response that is anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times stronger than someone who's 18 to 26.
Their immune systems are just primed and ready to go.
They are. And that strength is what has allowed for these smart, efficient dosing schedules.
Let's clarify that, because the 2-dose versus 3-dose rule can be confusing.
It's all based on that powerful immune response. If you start the series between ages 9 and 14, you only need 2 doses.
For example, one now and the second one in 6 to 12 months.
Exactly. And studies have definitively shown that 2 doses in that younger group gives the same level of protection as 3 doses in an older person.
So their young immune system can get the job done with just 2 shots. That saves money, it increases compliance.
It's a huge public health win. Conversely, for anyone 15 and older, or anyone who is immunocompromised, you need the standard 3-dose regimen.
Typically at months 0, 2, and 6.
Right. And you have to complete all 3 within 1 year to ensure you get that full, robust immune activation.
Okay, let's talk about the real-world impact. The efficacy data is it's remarkable.
The results are undeniable. The vaccine is preventing 90% of all HPV-related cancers. And in countries that have high vaccination rates like Australia, we're seeing massive public health shifts.
What are they actually seeing on the ground?
They're seeing huge population-level reductions in the virus itself. The U.S. saw an 80% drop in the prevalence of the main HPV types among teenage girls after the vaccine was introduced.
And Australia is on track to what? Eliminate cervical cancer?
They are on track to virtually eliminate cervical cancer as a public health problem within the next 20 years. That is the direct result of their high vaccination rates.
Okay, now let's get to the finding that could just fundamentally shift everything. The potential for a single-dose strategy.
This is a huge development, especially for global health equity. The studies are showing that a single dose of the 9-valent vaccine had 98.8% efficacy against persistent HPV infection after 3 years.
Wait. 98.8% from one shot. That sounds almost too good to be true.
It does.
What are the limitations there? Does that hold up in the real world?
That's the right question to ask, and researchers are asking it. The follow-up period is still relatively short. 3 years is good, but we need 10 or 20 years of data to confirm lifelong protection.
And these were controlled trials, not chaotic, real-world conditions.
Exactly. We need to see if it holds up across diverse populations, especially in places where co-infections like HIV might change the immune response.
But if it does hold up, this would be revolutionary.
It would change everything. Switching to a single dose would dramatically reduce costs, simplify the supply chain and cold chain requirements, and just make it so much easier to vaccinate people in hard-to-reach places.
It could accelerate the WHO's goals by decades.
Easily.
Okay, we have to talk about the other side of the coin. Safety and public trust. What's the consensus?
The data is crystal clear. HPV vaccines are highly safe. The common side effects are mild and temporary sore arm, maybe a low fever. The overall safety profile is exceptional.
But every so often, a rare case pops up and gets huge media attention. We need to talk about that complexity, like the NMO case reported in Asia.
We have to. Transparency is key. So this specific case involved a report of neuromyelitis optica, NMO, which is a rare autoimmune disorder. It was reported in a postpartum woman in Taiwan after she received the 9-valent vaccine.
That sounds alarming. So what did the investigation find?
The context is everything. First, current guidelines strictly advise against giving the vaccine during pregnancy and urge caution postpartum because the safety data in those groups is limited. This was a case of non-indicated use.
So the guidelines weren't followed.
Right. And second, the investigation tried to determine if the link was causal or just temporal. Did one thing cause the other, or did it just happen after it? They found that while the event occurred after the vaccination, a definitive causal link was not established. NMO is so rare, it can flare up spontaneously.
So the takeaway isn't that the vaccine causes NMO?
No, the takeaway is that clinical guidelines must be followed and that governments need transparent monitoring systems to investigate these extremely rare events. That's what builds public trust.
And we also have to just flat out debunk the anti-vaccine myths.
We do. Major global reviews have found no evidence linking the vaccine to long-term conditions like infertility or multiple sclerosis. Those claims have been scientifically debunked repeatedly. The evidence for prevention is just overwhelming.
Okay, we've established the virus is universal, but the cancer it causes is not. Let's talk about global inequality, policy, and the price war.
This is where we have to confront the political and economic reality. The burden of this cancer is shockingly unequal.
The number is just devastating. Globally, 94% of cervical cancer deaths happen in low and middle-income countries. Why is it so high?
It's a systemic failure. It's a critical lack of widespread screening programs, very limited access to treatment, and tragically, extremely low vaccine coverage. It's not a biological problem, it's a logistical and economic one.
Let's talk about those logistical hurdles. It's more than just the cost of the shot, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Cost is just the start. You have the challenge of the cold chain.
Keeping the vaccines at the right temperature from the factory to the syringe.
Right. And in a remote, rural area in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia, reliable electricity and refrigeration can be almost impossible to maintain.
So the vaccine can become ineffective before it's even administered.
It's a fundamental barrier. And then you have a lack of trained staff to give the 2 or 3 doses on a rigid schedule. That's why that single-dose idea is so revolutionary for these specific regions.
Meanwhile, in high-income countries, the entire focus has shifted.
It really has. Because screening and vaccination have reduced cervical cancer so much, the new public health emergency is the rise in male oropharyngeal cancer.
It's such a stark contrast. High-income countries are focused on gender-neutral vaccination for new risks, while low-income countries are still fighting to prevent cervical cancer deaths.
It's a geopolitical issue now.
Which brings us back to the critical role of male vaccination as a global strategy.
It's not just about personal protection for men. It's about community defense. We have to maximize coverage in all genders to achieve herd immunity.
To protect everyone.
Right. It's the fastest path to eliminating the virus as a major public health threat.
But even with that consensus, policy gaps are still there. A lot of public programs, even in places like Taiwan or Hong Kong, still mostly fund shots for school-aged girls.
And that creates a gap. It leaves boys and older women to pay for it themselves, and it's expensive.
Though Hong Kong did have that successful catch-up program.
They did. They offered free vaccination to women born in a specific 4-year window, which is a great example of a policy intervention trying to close that immunity gap quickly.
Now let's talk about the real economic game changer, the rise of China's domestic 9-valent vaccine, Sequel 9.
This is where market forces and health policy collide in a really interesting way. For years, the global market was basically a monopoly.
One imported product, one high price.
Exactly. The introduction of a domestic high-quality competitor just fundamentally alters that landscape for the whole world.
And the price point is the big news. It's roughly 520 RMB per dose.
Which makes it about half the price of the imported option.
That's a massive market disruption.
It's more than a local price cut. It changes the math for global purchasing. Organizations like Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, can now go to the big manufacturers and negotiate much lower prices.
Because there's competition.
Because there's real competition. This pressure lowers the economic barrier for everyone and helps organizations like Gavi buy the volume they need to meet the WHO's goals.
So domestic innovation can be a huge catalyst for global health.
It's arguably the single most important non-clinical step toward getting this amazing prevention tool to everyone who needs it.
We've made an overwhelming case for the vaccine as the primary defense. But what about that 10% of cancers it doesn't cover, or for people who just can't or won't get vaccinated?
We have to talk about the second line of defense, screening.
And let's be crystal clear about this.
Yes. Vaccination is primary prevention. Screening is secondary prevention. They are not mutually exclusive. They are complementary. You have to do both.
So we debunk the myth one last time. Getting the vaccine is not a license to skip your regular screening.
Absolutely not. The 9-valent vaccine covers about 90% of high-risk types. Screening is the safety net to catch that other 10% before they become cancer.
So for those who don't get the shot, regular screening is their most effective alternative. How does it work?
Screening is intervention after an infection has already happened, but before cancer develops. The goal is to find precancerous cells and remove them before they can progress.
Cutting off cancer development before it starts.
Exactly.
And the technology for screening has really evolved. We've moved from the traditional method to something much more modern.
Traditionally, we had the Pap smear, or cytology. That test looks for visible abnormal cell changes on the cervix. and it was a monumental success. It drastically reduced cervical cancer deaths.
But now the trend is shifting toward molecular testing.
Yes. The modern approach is HPV DNA primary screening. This test looks directly for the DNA of the high-risk virus itself, not just the cell damage it causes.
And why is testing for the DNA better?
It has a significantly higher negative predictive value. Basically, if you test negative for the virus DNA, your risk of developing cervical cancer in the next 5 years is incredibly low.
Which allows for longer screening intervals.
Right. Every 5 years, instead of every 1 or 3 years with the pap smear. It reduces unnecessary procedures and patient anxiety while keeping everyone safe.
Can you quickly explain the difference between pap co-testing and reflex testing?
Sure. A pap smear just looks for cell changes. Co-testing is when you get both the pap smear and the HPV DNA test at the same time.
And both are negative, you're good for 5 years.
Generally, yes. Reflex testing is used when the results are a bit unclear. Like if you test positive for HPV DNA but your pap smear is normal, they might do another test to clarify the risk before jumping to a more invasive biopsy.
It's a way to be more precise and avoid overtreatment.
Exactly.
Okay, but we have to highlight the limitations of screening when compared to vaccination.
They are stark. The first one is timing. Vaccination is true prevention before infection. Screening is intervention after infection.
And the second limitation is the anatomical focus. This is the biggest gap.
This is huge. Our standardized, widespread screening programs are incredibly effective at targeting the cervix. But we have a critical public health gap because there are no standardized, universally funded screening programs for HPV-related anal and oral cancers.
Which means men and other high-risk groups are often diagnosed only after symptoms appear.
When it's often too late. This leaves the vaccine as the only primary prevention tool for the throat, the penis, and the anus for most people.
And the final limitation is just compliance.
A vaccine is 2 or 3 shots. Screening requires lifelong adherence for decades. People move, they forget, they lose access. Compliance is the single biggest challenge for any screening program.
The vaccine is just a much more durable, set-it-and-forget-it protection.
Unmatched by screening.
So if vaccination is completely off the table, what's left?
You're left with risk reduction measures. Maintaining strong overall immune health is number 1, because your own body clears 90% of these. And then behavioral measures like monogamy or consistent barrier use can help reduce exposure.
But none of those are 100% protective.
Not at all. They just rely on constant vigilance.
Okay, so let's synthesize everything we've covered today. From E6 and E7 proteins to the economic impact of that half-price vaccine. What is the distilled key message?
The message is that HPV prevention is a critical, gender-neutral, global public health issue. We have the science and the tools to essentially eliminate the vast majority of these cancers.
The risk is lifelong, and we need universal, affordable access to the solution.
And the conclusion is simple. For anyone in the recommended age bracket, and many places now recommend it up to age 45, getting the HPV vaccine is probably the single most valuable health investment you can make.
And for women, the vaccine is not an excuse to skip your regular life-saving screening.
Never.
Before we wrap, let's leave our listeners with that one provocative thought that came out of the efficacy data.
Right. Given the emerging and really significant data on the near-perfect efficacy of a single dose, how quickly should global health authorities shift their policies?
Should they prioritize maximizing single-dose coverage for the largest number of people, especially in low-resource countries?
Or should they stick with the logistical complexity and cost of a full 2 or 3 dose regimen? That one question could change the health outcomes for millions of people almost overnight.
That is the future of public health right there. Now, as always, remember that this discussion was based on objective, scientific facts. We are here to give you the information for critical, independent thought.
We're not your doctors. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into health and global policy, please remember to subscribe to Sip&Talk.
And before you go, please do us a solid. Go check out our wonderful friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickeytolife.
Mickey to Life. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye.